Hi there, I'm Michelle the Painter from Berkshire Paint and Sip, and this is Paint and Sip at Home. Alright, so today I'm going to be painting Tulip Mouse House and I'm sipping on some blueberry tea. And if you enjoy this process, I do hope that you like and subscribe to my channel and that you also check out my Patreon page where you're going to find additional painting perks. So let's get painting and let's get sipping. Alright, so for my materials today, I'm going to be using a stretched and primed 16 by 20 inch canvas. If you're painting along with me, you can certainly switch up the size, but that's what I'll be using. I'm going to be using acrylic paint today. My colors are titanium white, green oxide, Mars black, burnt umber, which I like to call brown, chrome yellow, purple violet, and magenta. And of course you can switch up those colors if you'd like to, but that's what I'll be using. For my tools today, I have 3 brushes. I have a 1/2 inch wide flat bristle brush, I have a number 10 round synthetic brush, and I have a number 1 round synthetic brush. And I will refer to these as small, medium, and large as we go through the painting process. And of course you could switch those up if you'd like to, but that's what I'll be using. If you're painting along with me, you'll probably want to have a cup of water for washing your brushes, as well as a paper towel for drying your brushes. And down below this video, in the video description, I will be providing you with a couple of additional resources that can help you throughout your painting process. One of them is a link where you can purchase the same exact paint kit that I'm using, from the same size and type of canvas to the same type of paints and brushes and all the good stuff in between. So that's there. There's also a link where you can download a free image of the final painting. So you can print that and use it as visual reference as you go through the painting process. And there's also written step-by-step instructions down there for you as well. And that's all we're going to need today. Alright, so what we're going to do for the first step is we're going to paint our background. I'm going to be using my large bristle brush. The colors that I'm using are green and black. And what I'm doing is I'm going to make myself a dark green that will act as the base color for all of the grass and flowers that we're going to be doing. I'm going to have it dark green up at the top, and then when I get down to the bottom I'll incorporate a little bit of black so it goes even a little bit darker. So I have pre-mixed myself a dark green color. So what I did was I just took a little bit of black and I blended it in with some of my green oxide. Let me just do this way so it doesn't slide off. So something like this. I know that my green will get a little bit darker as it dries. You don't have to add a lot of black into it. The black really takes over and is pretty powerful, so just add a tiny bit in there. If you got the kit from us, you are going to want to keep a little bit of your green oxide available for a future step, so don't mix all of your green oxide with the black at this point. And then once you've got the green that you're looking for, you just go ahead and paint it onto the canvas. I'm going to be using a left to right kind of brush stroke, but you could really use any type of brush stroke that you want. On my sides, I'll probably just kind of go up and down to get those to be nice and covered, but you don't, when you're using a solid color like this for the majority of a background, if you know that it's going to be a nice solid color and it's going to get good coverage, you can really get away with doing any kind of brush stroke, because by the time it dries, if it's just one color, you're not going to detect those brush strokes. But if you feel that you want to detect the brush strokes, you could certainly do a vertical type of application. So because we're going to be doing some grass and stuff in the background, so that would speak to the direction of the grass. But I'm using just a solid color throughout this whole area, except for when I get down to the bottom. So I'm just going to be applying it in whatever way is the most efficient and gives me a pretty good coverage throughout the area. If I do detect some streakiness or uneven coverage, I'm okay with that. I can either go back after it dries and do a second coat on top of it, or when I do my details for my grass and my flowers and stuff like that, it will get covered any any spottiness that might not have gotten covered in this base coat will get covered during that process. You could also paint along the edges of your canvas. That's going to make it look all nice and finished like a professional painting, but that's up to you on how finished you want yours to be. So I came all the way down with this color. Now I'm going to pick up a little bit of black on my dirty brush, and I'm just going to kind of incorporate a little bit of black down here so it makes it just appear a bit darker down here at the bottom. I don't want it to go all the way black, but just a little bit is going to get that started for me. And I'm just using kind of a chaotic little brush stroke to get this to blend in. And then if you want, like I said, you could certainly do a second coat, but we are going to be using our, let's see, we're going to use our medium brush for the next step. So once you've got this done, you can put this large brush away, take out your medium brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to paint the base coat for our tulips. I'm going to be using my medium brush. The color I'm going to use is Magenta. So I do recommend that before you start this step that you make sure your canvas is dry. So this is that time where you get to take an extra long break if you'd like to. Or you can find some kind of fun fanning method to get it dry. Or you can do as I did and just whip out a blow dryer and get it dry that way. So I'm going to guide you through a series of just dots, and we're going to connect the dots to make our nice main focal point flower. And then I'm going to have, and it's going to be huge. It's going to take up a lot of the canvas. Then I'm going to have a couple of medium-sized ones down on the bottom right-hand corner, and then we'll have a whole bunch of small out-of-focus ones in the background. You could certainly draw this out with a pencil or a piece of chalk if you'd like, but I'm just going to use paint because it's a really simplistic shape. We're just going for the outside shape of it. We'll be doing all the other details later. So I'm going to load my brush with some magenta paint. I'm going to find myself the center of my canvas, left to right and top to bottom. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up about 3 inches and then over maybe about 1.5 inches to 2 inches. This is going to be the top right hand corner of my flower. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to stay at about the same height. I'm going to come to the left of that maybe about 4 inches and then up another 1.5 inches or so, somewhere in through here. I'm going to connect these two dots. This is going to be the top edge of my flower, and it's going to represent the back edge of the flower. So I'll have a couple of little ripples for my petals. So I'm going to go like this, and then maybe I'll bring this up in this vicinity, somewhere in through here, and then I'll kind of come back down, and then maybe just kind of bring it over in like a little ripply way to get to this marker. Your paint is going to look streaky and see-through if you're using the same color as I am, because it's got transparency to it and it's going to see what's behind it. Don't worry about that at this stage. We'll make that go away in a future step. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come about halfway between these, and I'm going to go down at a diagonal, not necessarily towards the corner of my canvas, but a little bit to the left of that. So kind of center and then diagonal in this direction. I'm going to stop when I'm about, I would say, 4 or 5 inches away from the bottom of my canvas. So somewhere in through here. I've got my flower tipped a little bit, so that's why I put it at a little bit of an angle. Then I'm going to connect here to here and here to here. This is going to be the outside edge of the flower, and I don't necessarily, for me, I'm going to have a couple of different petals, so I'm going to have a little bit of a bump at the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this from here, I'm going to bring it up, and then once I get to about here, I just bring it in a little bit, and then I'm going to bring this all the way up to this marker in through here. And you can make a little bit of a wavy line if you want to. Your flower does not have to be perfect. It can have lots of little lumps and bumps and stuff in it, so you can certainly make it whatever way that you want. I like mine to just have a little bit of organic shape to them. And then I'm going to do the same thing over on this side. So I'm going to come to about here, bring it in a little bit, and then I'll bring it back out like this, and this is going to meet up in through here. So I can bring this down at kind of a diagonal curved type of a way. Something like this will work for me. And then I'm just going to color in the entire center. Oops, that fell off my brush. I had a lot of paint on my brush. I'm going to color the entire center area. So this this color is see-through, especially if you're using a student grade paint as I am. So it will take on the colors behind it. So that's why you're going to see all these light spots and dark spots. I'm going to be using moving my brush in an up and down kind of curved type of way. This will start the striping on those petals. So I'm utilizing the effect of the translucency or transparency to help me along making these fantastic details on the flower. So again, just kind of moving my brush in a striping fashion. Down at the bottom, it really doesn't matter. This is going to be a petal that comes up from the bottom anyways. And you can use a lot of paint or a little bit of paint. The more you use, the more you're going to have the evidence of that magenta color. But again, we've got lots of steps to go. So if your color isn't really vibrant at this point, it's okay. It's meant to just be the base coat at this time. So we'll make it brighter as we go through that painting process. Then I'm going to make a couple more big ones down in through here. So I'm going to come in from my bottom right hand corner. I would say maybe about 1.5 inches to 2 inches, then maybe about another 4 inches, and then I'll just bring these up and give myself a little bit of a cup type of appearance. I'm going to connect these two with a ripply kind of line, and then I'm just going to paint this in with this base color. And again, your shapes don't have to be exactly as mine. You can certainly make them go in different directions. You can have them all open or closed, whatever feels comfortable to you. And I'm going to have another partial one, I would say somewhere in this vicinity. So maybe I'm going to come up maybe about 1 inch or 2 from this little tip here. So maybe about 1 inch. And then go over to the right. This is just going to kind of sneak out the side in through here so we can just see a little portion of it. So I'm just giving a fun kind of circular or roundish type of shape. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a whole bunch of little out of focus ones. So I don't need a lot of paint on my brush, but what I'm going to in essence do is just give myself a whole bunch of little round or oval type of shapes that are going to represent this style of flower off in the distance. I don't necessarily need really clean edges to it or perfect edges. I'm really just looking for something that's going to give me the illusion that these flowers are getting smaller and smaller as they go away. And they're going to be a little bit more out of focus as they go away. So if these ones you might want like this one to be a little bit bigger than the ones that are the farthest away, but they're going to end up being out of focus by the time we're done. So you don't have to make them anything special. You can even just rub the color in certain areas. I'm going to have maybe one over in through here, but if you can get some of the shape there, great. If not, no worries. And that's all I'm going to do for that step. You could certainly do a second coat, but again, we've got lots of other information to go on top of this. I'm going to be using this same brush for the next step, so you can just wash and dry your medium brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to paint our background grass. I'm going to be using my medium brush. The colors I'm using are my dark green, green oxide, yellow, and black. And if I need to use or want to use any other colors, I certainly will, and I'll let you know. So what I'm really doing is I'm looking to give texture to the background to make it give you the illusion that these are all tulips that are just kind of in some grass and some dimension. So I'm going to be doing some out of focus or softer grass up at the top. And as I work my way towards the bottom of my canvas, I'm going to get these pieces or these blades of grass to look more like they're in focus. I'll also give the illusion of maybe a couple of leaves coming up the sides of maybe these couple of flowers that are coming towards the viewing range or getting more in focus as I come down. We're going to put some big leaves on the outside of these two flowers later, but they're going to be huge and in focus and lots of detail too. So we'll do those as a different step. So what I'm going to do to start is I'm going to pick up some green oxide and my dark green. So what this does, I'm going to start at the top and work my way down. I'm going to be using these carefree brush strokes where I'm almost kind of just rubbing in these vertical type of marks. I don't need it to do anything other than to give this subtle illusion of vertical pieces or a color pattern that's going to allow for the viewer to get the understanding that this is perhaps blades of grass off in the distance. Because I'm using the dark green plus green oxide on my brush at the same time, I'm getting these little pops of pieces of grass that are a little bit lighter than that background color. I don't need to do it all the way in the green oxide, but because I'm using them both on my brush at the same time, I'll also get some pieces that are a little bit more vibrant than others. And you can even rub it in some areas so that way it's not a firm piece of grass, so it looks more out of focus. If you bump into your flowers along the way, that's okay. That's gonna happen. We're gonna be painting on top of them anyways. We're gonna be painting a second coat on top of those flowers, so don't feel like you have to make it, you have to avoid touching them. You also want to kind of put natural bend into that grass, so don't always go straight up and down. If you can give it with a little bit of wiggle, that'll make sense too. You can bring, I just picked up just my green oxide, so it's gonna start to get a little bit brighter as I come down in through here. You can progressively get a little bit lighter as you're coming down. The green oxide is going to work out for me here, and then as I come down this left hand side, I know I've got a big huge leaf in through there. I think in a second I'm going to start adding a little bit of yellow to the equation, but right now I'm just picking up some green oxide, giving myself a little bit of the illusion around those particular flowers. So what I'm going to do now is I have pre-mixed myself a little bit of a more yellow green. What I did is I took the green oxide and added a touch of chrome yellow into it. So this is going to give me a more kind of intense, lighter, a little bit lighter version of green as I start working towards the in focus stuff. And I don't just have to use that on my brush. So if I'm starting to put some of these bright pieces of grass, I want them bigger and I want them kind of more bold as they're coming down towards the bottom. But if that's too much and it doesn't look natural, just pick up some of your background green as well. So you can use both that vibrant, that light yellow green with your background color, and that's going to give you this beautiful texture within the grass that's going to look nice and natural. And of course I don't want it to look like I'm painting around them, so as I get around the flowers, so as I get towards the flowers, again, bump into it. That's totally fine. That's what's going to make it look the most natural, because we're going to be painting back on top of the flower, so by bumping into it, that's going to make it look like the flower is going to be on top of it later. So don't be afraid to do that kind of stuff too. And as you're working your way down towards this bottom, I'm going to start picking up my yellow green plus black on my brush. So now I'm going to get these little shadowy areas within the texture of my grass. So this is my light yellow green with black on my brush, and this is going to make it look really nice and in focus, or a little bit more in focus than that back stuff, because we're seeing those details, we're seeing the shadows, and you can bring it all along in through here. You can make them wider by just pushing your brush a little bit harder into your canvas. So that's going to give you wider blades of grass. And then I'm just kind of making it look nice and natural, bringing it up here. I'm going to have the stem of my flower and a big leaf around here. So I don't need to do much in through here. Just want to make it look pretty natural. Maybe put a big leaf in through here, just, or a big piece of grass, maybe just making it look nice and natural. And then tinker with it as much as you want. Make it look, you know, let it dry for a minute, step back from it, see if there's any adjusting that you want to do. And then we're going to be using this same brush for the next step. So you can just wash it and dry it and get ready. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're doing the base coat for our leaves and our stem. I'm going to be using my medium brush. The colors I'm using are brown, white, that light yellowy green that we had, and that might be it. If I use any other colors, I'll let you know. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my stem on this big flower first. So I'm just going to pick up some brown plus a teeny bit of white on my brush. I don't need a lot of white, just an itty bitty bit on the tip. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to find what I would assume to be the bottom part of the flower. So if your flower is tipped, you don't want the stem over here. You want to just make sure that it would be, you know, kind of in the bottom. So I'm going to give myself maybe about an inch wide type of stem, and then I'm just going to bring it down in a little bit of a curved manner. And you want it wide enough to support this big huge flower. So just make sure that when you're doing it that it's not as slender as a piece of grass, because it will not proportionately look like it would hold the flower up if it was that slender. So again, just brown with a little bit of white on my brush is going to give me a nice base coat for this. I don't need a solid anything kind of color. I'm just looking for something nice and earthy. We'll add some highlights and shadows to it in a minute. So this is looking pretty good for me here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to wash and dry my brush in order to do the base coat for my big leaves. So these will be the leaves that are going to be for this flower in through here, and I'll have some around this flower. And then if I feel I missed any, like maybe I'll put a little bit for one on this little guy up in through here, or wherever else I feel like I want some leaves to go. So I'm picking up that light green color, the yellowish green that we created for the grass. And these tulips, they can have these really, they almost look like just big humongous pieces of grass to me. They're really long and just wide and kind of flat. They don't have a bunch of like movement to them, but they're definitely big and have lots of volume to them. So I'm going to have one kind of coming in through here. This is going to be the one for here. It's going to be pretty narrow at the top, and then I'll have it pretty wide as it comes down towards the base. So again, I'm just using that yellowish or that light green color. That was a lot of paint on my brush. That brush load held a lot of paint on it. You can certainly have use a lot of paint or a little bit of paint. It's up to you. But I'm going to have just a little pointy tip to it and then just bring it down. And your paint could be as thick or as thin as you want at this point. This is just the base coat that's going to put them in place. We'll be making lots of other details later. So I think I'm also going to have maybe a tall one over on this side. I think I'm going to have this one coming higher than this one, and it's just going to really take on this edge over in through here. Maybe it's going to scoot behind this flower in through here. I'm going to have, I think, a series of these long pieces in through here. So I'm going to do another one maybe in through here. So maybe there's, you know, leaves from a neighboring flower that we don't see, or one that's off the camera in this direction. So you can imagine this foreground to be really whatever you want. You know, maybe there's 76 more flowers that, you know, we're just peeking through. The point of view here is down on the ground. We're really close to the ground, so you can really have fun. I think I'm going to kind of combine these two, maybe make this one come up in this direction. So when I put the details on these later with highlights and shadows, these will all kind of separate and have their own identity. But right now, just kind of putting them into place. I think I'm going to have one coming up from here that maybe is going to cross over these guys over here. So maybe I'll put this one somewhere in through here. And because we're using just, you know, this this yellowish green color. It may not stand out a ton right now on top of your background, but again, once we start adding more details to it, it'll stand out a whole lot more. But this just gets us started and gives us some nice natural progression in those colors. And then that one's looking pretty good to me. Now I'm gonna have a big, huge one over on this side. So I'm going way above here, well, not way above, maybe about 2 inches, and then over to here somewhere. This is gonna give me the tippy top of this one, and I'm just gonna kind of bring it down like this. It's gonna be behind this flower in through here, and then this is gonna go all the way down to the bottom. So I'm gonna take this and just kind of bring it out almost towards the edge of my canvas. And then as I come down in through here, just still kind of keeping it almost like round like the flower, because it would maybe kind of cup that flower when the flower was in its growth period. And then as I come down here, I want this to maybe look like it's on the outside or gonna be to the left of my stem. And don't worry about painting over other pieces of grass that you had already done. That's no big deal. And then I think I want a little piece of it as if it was, if you imagine it to just kind of come down in through here, and then we'll see a little sliver of it back over here. So I think I'm going to put a little sliver of this back on this side of the stem. And this will also get that stem to pop out a little bit more since we've got this nice light color. And then I'm just going to color this big huge one in. I'm still just using the light green color, and you could, you know, like I said, make it lighter or darker, but we're going to be doing all of our highlights and shadows to make these leaves pop out, and on a future step. This just really sets the stage. It gets us to understand where we want them. It forces us to make sure that we have good coverage on the painting, and lets us build the colors in a progressive way instead of just going for, you know, trying to make this leaf into all of its detail right at once. This helps us to just progressively build those colors and make them make sense. And then if you have any other little areas that you feel that you want this, like maybe I got a little tiny one, a little tiny tip up in through here or in through here, you can certainly add those fun little details. We're going to use this same brush for the next step. So once you've got the base coat for your leaves, you can wash and dry this medium brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to finish our stem and our leaves. I'm going to be using my medium brush. The colors I'm using are black, brown, white, yellow, my light, my yellow green that we made for the leaves, and any other colors that I feel I want to use. I might even use a little magenta too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my leaves first, because I know that this leaf is behind this stem, so it makes sense to kind of tackle that before I tackle the stem. All I'm really looking to do is add a little bit of dimension to them with some highlights and shadows. So I'm going to put a little bit of a shadow up in the top of this leaf so I can get it to look like it's folding or bending over on the edges, like curled a little bit. And then I'll add a little bit of a highlight over in through here, maybe a touch of shadow underneath here. And then these guys in here, I'll probably focus more on little highlights on the tips and maybe a little bit of shadow down below. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a little bit of black and brown on my brush at the same time. I didn't put a lot, just an itty bitty bit. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of section off this top area to give myself a little kind of indent for the leaf where it just kind of is curled in. I don't know how else to say it. We're making the inside of the leaf. I just picked up some of my leaf color, that yellowish green, so I can get this to kind of blend in a little bit, and then just kind of pulling this down. This is going to give us a nice transition down into the interior of this leaf. I'm just kind of rubbing it with the side of my brush right now to get it to blend into that main color. And then I'm going to just pick up some of that original yellow green to get this to blend in. I'm doing it in the direction that I feel the little grain of that leaf is. So for me, it kind of just is coming down in this fashion. I'm going to pick up a tiny bit of black and brown and my leaf color I've got 3 colors on my brush right now to give myself a little bit of a shadow back in through here. I don't necessarily want it to go as dark as this little crevice up here, so I just kind of mute it a little bit with the base color. I just want to kind of sneak it in behind here and just rub it so it blends in nicely. That'll give me a nice little shadowy area back in through there, maybe a touch over in through here. And then I'm going to put a tiny bit with the remnants of my brush down at the base of this leaf in through here. Now I'm just going to pick up my base green color to make sure that I've got a nice coverage throughout here. And then I'm going to pick up the green, yellow, plus a tiny bit of white on my brush. So this is going to give me a little lighter area over here on the side, which will make it kind of look like it's got a little bit of volume as it's maybe bending a little bit or having, you know, just a little bit more fullness to it. That'll give me that light from the edge, and it'll also help it to pop out from the background colors as well. So if you're having difficulty with the tonal value being too similar to your background colors, you can always add a bit of this type of lightness, which will pop it out a little bit more. I'm going to do the same thing for a little light on the top, but now I'm picking up yellow and white at the same time on my dirty brush, and I'm using hardly any paint on my brush. I'm really just looking to give myself this pretty vibrant little edge to it, and nothing much, just trailing it off. I'll put a little bit in through here, giving myself just the illusion of that little edge of the leaf, and then you just blend it out as much as you want. I'm going to do the same thing over in through here. So maybe I've got my base color green plus a touch of white on my brush just to give myself the little illusion of a highlight in through there. I think actually I want a little bit of highlight on here too, just to get this edge to pop out a little bit more. So wherever you want, again, to see that edge pop out, just a bit of a highlight will work. I'm going to tackle little shadows on these guys, and then we'll pop a little highlight on them. So I just washed and dried my brush. So I'm going to go in for my base color of the yellow green plus a touch of brown and black on my brush at the same time. And this is just going to give me, if I want a little bit of a shadow at the bottom of this guy in through here, just so it recedes down into the grass a little bit, or down, you know, into the darkness a little bit. That helps to do that. So I don't need to do much. Just if I want these two to separate, maybe I just decide what's going to happen here. So we'll put this one maybe in front of the other one, and you know, you just imagine it to be whatever way you want. You could have more leaves than I have, you could have less. It's totally up to you. So that just popped that one out a little bit more, and then maybe I'm just using the remnants on my brush to put a little bit of a shadow at the bottom of these guys. Well, that one doesn't have a shadow at all. There we go. A little bit more paint on my brush. There we go. So now I'm going to just pop my base color plus yellow and white on my brush. I'm going to just have all 3 of those colors, very little bit of each on the tip of my brush, just to pop in a little bit of a highlight on these edges. So I've got this one in through here, and I just bring it back and just kind of ride it down along the edge of that leaf. I just picked up a little bit more yellow to get that one to pop a bit, and you just keep intensifying it. Like I just picked up a tiny bit more white. So yellow, white, and my yellow green are the colors I'm using for these highlights. And I just picked all 3 of them up again. Gonna start up here and then just kind of trail it down. And whatever happens, just let happen. That's, you know, Mother Nature at her finest, is when she's gonna just put a brighter highlight than you expected, and it all works out in the long run. So I've got them all on my brush again, just kind of bringing this down. This one's gonna lay in front of here, and if you wanted it to blend in with that base color, just pull that brush and blend it in a little bit more, picking up that base color just to satisfy my blending desires. And then that looks pretty good to me. Maybe a little bit more of my base green color. And then I'm going to wash and dry my brush, and I'm going to hit the stem in through here. So I just really need a shadow underneath where it hits the main flower and a highlight on the edge. I want to keep it pretty neutral and natural looking, so again, a tiny bit of brown and black on my brush at the same time. This is going to give me a little bit of a shadow right underneath that stem, and then I just can pull it down. I think I'm going to put a tiny bit more black on my brush so it gets a little bit deeper and darker up in through here, and then I'm just going to kind of pull it right down and down the edge and just blend it a little bit so it's got that bit of a dimensional element to it, and it blends in with the rest of the stem. And with the remnants on my brush, I'll put a tiny bit down at the base because I feel that it would have a little bit of shadow as it's going into the grassy area. And then I'm going to put a tiny bit of a highlight. So I'm going to use white and brown and maybe a touch of yellow on my brush to give myself a nice bright highlight in through here. And if you wanted this highlight to be a bit more colorful, you could certainly add a bit of maybe your magenta with the yellow. Like, I want to do it. I want to do it. I'm going in. I'm going to pick up a tiny bit of yellow and magenta. This will cause like an on-the-fly, like orange type of color. So a bit of those two on my brush at the same time. And this is going to just give me a little bit of an orangey tone in that stem. So again, if it's not having enough color variation or it's not popping enough, you can do little tricks like that just to put some more earthy tones into it. And then we're going to be using this same brush for the next step. So once you've got this done, you can wash and dry your medium brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to paint the dark areas on our front flowers. So the front flowers for me are going to be these three in through here. And when I refer to the dark areas, I'm referring to anything that I feel is going to be shadowy, plus I'm going for a nice like dark purpley magenta type of color for my flowers. So I'm going to have a lot of that dark purple down at the bottom. So this is going to add contour because I'm going to be giving darkness to my color of my petals down towards the bottom. And I'm also going to be adding darkness like down inside the flower, like there's shadows in there, and between the petals there'll be a little shadow, and underneath shadow as well. And then when I get to these ones, again, I'll have some shadow inside the flower, and my dark purple will start to encapsulate that outside of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, in essence, kind of outline my petals first, and then we'll start adding these dark areas in. So I'm going to, the colors I'm going to use are purple and black and probably some magenta as well. So I'm going to start with purple and a touch of black on my brush. I don't need a lot of black, just a little bit in order to kind of deepen that tone. What I'm going to do is I'm going to first do a really big petal that's going to be kind of the bottom cup of this tulip. So I don't want it to go too high. So if this is about the center, right about here of my tulip, I'm going to go up just a little bit from that as the tippy top of this. And then I'm just going to kind of give it like a nice scalloped edge along the sides. And I'm going to bring it right to where we have these two little dips in through here. So I don't want a really big firm line. I'm just going to really use the tip of my brush to give myself this little bit of a scalloped kind of outline. And I'll do the same thing over on this side, kind of keeping it in a round type of way. But again, doesn't have to be anything fancy, just something that's going to give us that type of shape. And then I'm going to start building my other petals. So I'm going to have one that's kind of coming around the edge on this side. So I'm going to come from this little tippy top point that we made up here. Yours might look a little bit different than mine. And I'm going to just take my brush and kind of outline a little bit of an exterior petal. And I just put a tiny bit of water on my brush so I can get these kind of more slender lines, just working so I don't have a real thick, wide line. If I have a little bit of moisture on my brush, it helps to keep my point pointier, and it allows me to just give these little fine lines. I'm going to put another petal in through here. So this one is maybe almost dead center in my flower, somewhere right about here. I'm going to have it connect up to here with a little bit of a couple of edges to it. So maybe a little bit to the right of that, maybe right about here. So I'm going to go one bump like this. I'm going to have another bump like that. And then I'll have another bump in through here, and then this just kind of curls around, and it's going to disappear into this petal over here. I'm going to do another one. I'm reloading my brush with my purple, black, and a touch of water. I'm going to have another petal in through here that's going to be the where I put this little dent in through here. I'll put this one coming. So wherever I have dents, you can really kind of make them into the edges of petals, and this one's going to be in through here. My little mouse is going to be poking his head out of this area here, so I want to make sure that I save enough room in through there for him to go. And then I'm going to have another little one in through here, and maybe just a little edge over there. So this is going to be the outline for my petals on this one. I'll go ahead and do a couple outlines on this little guy over here. So black, purple, touch of water. I'm just going to have a couple of petals on this one, nothing too major, just giving myself a little bit of the iconic kind of tulip type of look like that, and maybe I've got another one kind of coming, meeting this in here. You can ripple those edges a little bit. This one I'm just gonna, where I have this little dip in here, we'll make that one go like that. So now that I've done that, now I'm going to start working where I want my darkness. So I definitely want some darkness in the center there. So I'm not even going to wash my brush. I'm just going to kind of work with what I've got on my brush, which is the purple, black, and a little bit of water. And I'm just going to rub in this center area along my petal edges, and I'm going to bring it up in towards that the top of that petal. I'm going to pick up a little bit more purple and a touch of water on my brush right now, just to make sure that I've got this nice darkness in through here, maybe a touch more black too, so I can get a nice deep darkness in between these two in through here. We will be putting lightness up at the top of this interior petal as well, but right now, again, I'm just kind of adding that darkness so it looks nice and shadowed inside there, like it's a little house for a mouse and it's got nice coziness inside. Then when I get to the where it meets the magenta, I just pick up the magenta to get it to blend in without even washing my brush. This just helps me to, again, just start to really build those layers and make sure that they're the way that I want. So I started with the black and the purple in the dark area, and then I moved into a little bit of purple, and then I moved into my magenta. So I'm going to approach the bottom the same way. I'm not using any white, so I don't even really need to wash my brush when I go from like the magenta to the darker tones, because the darker tones will overpower the magenta. So I'm picking back up purple, black, and a touch of water so I can get some real nice darkness in between here. So these two petals are just going to kind of separate with this darkness that I'm adding right now. And you don't have to go too far, just enough to kind of get that deep darkness. I'm not going to put the magenta on yet. I'm just going to kind of travel with this darkness on my brush right now. I will add I'll get that magenta to blend in a minute, but while I've got this darkness on my brush, I'm just going to cruise through these dark areas. So purple and black is setting the stage for me. If it's all black on you, then you need to back off on the black and add more purple. You don't necessarily want this to go all black unless you're in a little crevice like that. Then you can go pretty darn dark, but as you're working your way out, just keep picking up the purple, and that'll help you to get some nice tonal value from that dark black into the purple. And if it doesn't go perfect right now, don't worry about it, again, because we've got highlights to go. This one is the outside one, so I'm going to put a lot of purple on this one, almost all the way up to the top. I'm going to put the magenta in a second, but that's going to get me started. I'm going to put a little bit of this purple on the exterior over here. So I didn't wash my brush. I just picked up more purple. Maybe I've got little bits of black left in my bristles. So I just am adding some darkness in through here. I definitely want a little bit of darkness as this petal meets this one meets this one. So whatever those remnants are on my brush right now, they're working. I'm just kind of rubbing them in. I think there's a little bit of purple and black on there. And now that I've got it laid out with those, I'm going to just pick up my magenta and start making sure that this all makes blends in a little bit. So just a little bit of the magenta, getting that edge color to blend in with the darkness that we've put on the darker areas. And then I will I'm on this one, I know that it's rounded, so I'm kind of again using my brush or moving my brush in that rounded type of way that is going to give that petal its distinct shape. And then again, just picking up my magenta right now to make sure that I've got a pretty good coverage. And I'm on this particular petal, I'm kind of loading it on a little bit heavier so I can have some good coverage. But again, I definitely have those highlights to go, so that's going to help with that. I think I'm going to pick up a little bit more purple so I can get this transition a little bit better into this one. There we go. That's looking pretty good. Let's see here. I need a little bit more magenta on my brush to get this back one in through here. Right now I'm just looking to make sure I've got pretty good coverage on these petals. As I'm working my way towards these two here, they're starting to cup in, so I am changing that direction of my brush stroke. When I first put it on, it was kind of more down towards the center. Now that I'm working my way towards these little edges and details, I can curve it just a little bit more, and then just bringing it back here. And again, just picking up that magenta to make sure it blends into those darker areas. So you can overlap it, and then just a little bit on this edge in through here. And then I'll just hit those, the smaller ones down in through here in a second. And again, this center one is, this petal that we're working on right now will be disguised by our little cute mouse in a little while too. So that's looking pretty good. Maybe a little more purple on my brush. I just picked up a little more purple. I really like this purple magenta combination, so it's going to be well pronounced in this painting. So here we go. That works out for my painterly eye. And now I'm going to transition down into these guys down in through here. So just a teeny bit of black and purple is going to give me my darkness on the center, in the center of this flower in through here. Bringing it up a little bit from the bottom. So again, touch of black and purple on my brush. Again, you could use a little bit of water as well, but right now I'm just kind of rolling with that. I just picked up just purple on my dirty brush to get this to kind of go up into the flower. And again, moving that brush as I feel these petals kind of curl in. So I changed that direction just a little bit to make sure that it appears as if those petals just curl in towards the center of the flower like that. I'll put a little bit of magenta on in a minute, but just getting this purple and then rubbing this center dark area up towards those edges so we can get a little bit of fade or gradient. Now I'm picking up my paint or my magenta just to make sure this all blends in. So magenta is kind of from the tip back down towards the darkness. Again, just to get it to blend well. Our highlights will make it pop even more, but this again just gives that texture and the helps to make these colors transition into one another, because I really liked the multi-tonal change of, I was looking at these tulips that had this beautiful dark purple color, and I liked how in certain spots of the lights that it looked like it's got this magenta kind of twinkle to it. So I wanted to incorporate both the colors. I'm picking up, let's say, a little bit of purple and just a tiny bit of black because I don't have far to go on this one. And oops, I need a little bit more black. I still had a little bit of magenta on my brush there, which is totally fine. So a little bit in through there, and then I'll pick up my purple to get that direction of that petal. Like that. I think I need a little bit of this darkness in through here as well. And then I'll pick up a tiny bit of my magenta just to go back in the opposite direction to make sure that they blend in well together like this. And then up at this little tippy top in through here. And then I'm going to be using the same brush for the next step. So once you've got your darkness to your petals, you can wash and dry this medium brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to finish our front flowers. So these 3 flowers. I'm going to be using my medium brush. I'm in essence going to be adding highlights and any other light area that I want and giving them the rest of their shape or as much shape as I want. So I'm using my medium brush. I'm going to be using magenta, purple, and white predominantly, but if I feel that I want to or need to go into another color, I certainly will. So really what I want to do is kind of identify my little edges to my petals, as well as make sure that I have as much kind of curl on them as I want. So that's going to be accomplished by giving a little bit more of a highlight on this part that curls over. I also want to kind of amp up that purpley type of color. So when I see flowers, a lot of times they're going to have a transitional fade of sorts. Sometimes they can even have lightness, like at the bottom of their petals as they're kind of coming out of that bottom area. They can have like a form of light version of their color. It's not necessarily a highlight from a light source, but it might just be a lighter version of that petal color. It also could be a little bit of wherever the light source is. If it's on the other side of the flower, you might catch a little bit of lightness on the exterior edges of the petals. So I'm going to add some of that lightness. So as I go through that process, you'll now understand why I'm going to do that. But what I'm first going to do is just kind of identify where I want all of my little highlights to go. So I'm going to pick up a tiny bit of white and purple on my brush, just a very tiny bit of both. This just kind of gets my brain started as to where I want these little highlights. So I definitely want a little bit on the edge of my flower petals over in through here, just kind of skipping it along that edge. This is an edge in through here, so that tells me where that is going to go. I've got little edges over in through here, and you can, when I do the edge, especially if I don't want it to be a solid line, I just kind of pull it back into the flower a little bit. So again, white and purple, this is just helping me understand where I want everything to go. Going to kind of give myself a little bit of an edge there. Maybe this kind of ripples down in through here. And then again, I don't necessarily want this interior line to be solid, so I can just, while that paint is still wet, just rub it so there's a little bit of a blend there. Again, purple and white is giving me my, my edge color. Oops, I need a little more. I have white on my brush. Let me just see if I can, there we go. No, I need a little more white. Sometimes less is more. Sometimes I have really too little on my brush. So just my little edge, and then just pull it back so I can identify where it's going to go. I want some over in through here. So I'm just going to skip this kind of along this edge like this. This one I don't necessarily want to come back into the flower too much. So I'm just going to kind of soften this edge, but not pull it back like I did on those sides in through there, because I really want this to look like it's curled over. I'm going to add a little bit more purple and white to my brush. I'm going to put a little highlight in. This is that exterior highlight that I was talking about a minute ago. So a little purple and white in through here, and pull it up this, this bottom portion of this petal that we had outlined. So just a little bit in through here, and then just kind of pull it up this exterior. And you can finesse it in a minute. This is just getting us started. I want a little bit of a highlight on this exterior here. So right now I'm just using the remnants that are on my brush. Maybe this is a little bit over here. And then let's see, I've got some, I want to put some here. So a little bit of my purple and white on my brush at the same time. I'm going to put a nice highlight in through here. And this one I'm going to pull like I did that one. So just pull this down in this curved manner. Again, this is what's going to start to sell the story of the contour or the form of this flower. So something like that. I'm going to put my edges on here. So again, tiny bit of purple and white, just putting little edges over in through here. This one, I don't know if I'm going to pull back too far, maybe a little bit. Pull this side, this one down in through here, and then maybe just a little bit in through here. And again, I'm going to add more in a minute. This is just letting my brain kind of get straight before I start really going hog wild on all my colors. So this one here, I think I'm going to have, this kind of like curved from around the other side, and maybe have a little edge to it in through here. And this will be like the exterior, and that'll be the interior of it. So that means I could probably pull this down on the inside. I'm thinking I'll put a little bit of the magenta on it in a minute, and maybe a little on the outside. Let's see, I think I'm gonna have a little highlight on this outside over here. So purple and my white, just like I did over here. I'm gonna do a little bit of that down on the edge of this one in through here. So a little purple and white will help me sell that story of this little luminescent area. And this almost looks like a nice lavender, a little bluish kind of when it's on top of that magenta. So that's kind of laid all my highlights out on that one. I'm going to do the same thing with these two little guys here. So purple with a touch of white. So again, just kind of putting the little edge to my petal, and then for here I'm going to just kind of pull it back in this direction, give me that little bit of a highlight on the edge of that flower petal. Same thing here, purple and white is going to do. And again, you can see I'm not doing a lot. I'd rather just kind of go slowly and build this in a gentle slow fashion than to do too much and say, oh my god, now I can't see any of my colors underneath, and have to rework the whole thing. So just if you can build slowly and mindfully, that it speeds up your painting process, which sounds pretty silly, but if you go into each step tactfully and mindful of what you're doing, then you will have less rework to do later. So just keeping those processes in place and trying not to overwork something, or just again being mindful of what you're doing, you'll have less rework, which means your painting will get done faster. I'm going to do the same thing over here. So again, I'm just using my purple and white, putting my little highlight and pulling it out. Maybe I've got a little highlight on this edge over here as well. And of course, you don't have to do yours exactly as mine. So that's pretty much where I want my highlights to go. Now what I'm going to do is just kind of finesse them and amp them up. I'm putting a little bit of my magenta on my brush right now to work on this little area here. So I reloaded it with magenta. Now I'm picking up a little bit of white. So magenta and then some white is what's going to get this to be really nice and vibrant and speaking to those spring colors. You can, of course, make this as bright or as soft as you want it. You can bring more of the magenta into it or more of the purple, wherever your visual preference is. I just picked up a little bit of magenta and now I'm going in for white. So most of the parts that I'm going to do right now are probably going to be with the magenta and white, kind of alternating them just to get I wanted a little highlight here. I guess I missed it. to get these highlights finished. But you could certainly, if you liked the purple better, maybe you do more of the purple color. Maybe yours ends up a beautiful lavender type of color. So don't feel obligated to make it exactly the same color as mine. You could really visually be wanting it in a different way, in a different color scheme. Tulips come in all different colors. You could have yellow ones and purple ones and pink ones and white ones and whatever colors you want. But right now I'm just kind of alternating back and forth between my magenta and white to enhance these little highlights and make them kind of pull them down more or make them brighter where I feel that they need to be brighter. So magenta and white is what's going to do that for me. And again, I'm just kind of alternating back and forth, making sure that I've got them as bright as I want. And if I again needed to go into the purple and or the black for blending purposes, you could certainly do that. So like in this area here, if I'm going about this and I'm saying, that's just not blending the way that I want, I can easily pick up more purple. I just picked up more purple and get that to blend in as much as I want. That's, you know, the joy of acrylic paint. You can just keep adding those layers on it until you've got it into that blend that you want or the texture that you want. So you just kind of keep doing those layers and building upon each other. I just picked up some magenta to make sure that I've got this edge worked out the way that I want, but I didn't wash my brush, so I had purple and magenta on there at the same time, picking up a little magenta. So right now I'm just kind of cruising along, seeing what areas I want to amp up or tone down a bit. This is looking pretty good to me in through here. And I will always, when I'm done, I like to step back. I like to let it dry and step back and look at it from a distance, let it go through that drying process, because sometimes these colors turn out a little bit different when they're dry than they are when they're wet. So that is a beneficial process to go through. You know, don't fight with it when it's wet. If it's not coming out the way that you want, sometimes just let it dry for a minute and then come back and you'll be able to see if it in fact did what you wanted it to do or if you need to work on it a little bit more. So that's another process that is really beneficial when building these type of paintings, you know, just continuing to work at it, watching it as it dries, seeing if there's any little fiddles that you want to do. And of course, when we're doing flowers, they're all just meant to be nice and fun and festive and floral. So there's no pressure to make them look perfect anyways. I think that's looking pretty good. I'm going to just go and amp up my little highlights on these guys. So again, just white and magenta is where I'm going to work with. I just picked up some white and just popping in these real bright little tips. I might not do anything more to this one. This one's looking pretty good to me. Maybe a touch of more magenta. Not much. I'm not going to do anything more except for this. But, you know, you think it's good and then it's like, oh, well, it might look a little bit better if I add just a teeny bit more magenta or a little bit more purple. So again, that's just going to be a preference on your part. Maybe magenta and purple kind of works out the edge of this one. So anything that works for you. And then this guy over in through here, made just a tiny bit of white and magenta on my brush just to give this little pop in through here. And then we're going to use this same brush for the next step. So once you've got this done, you can wash and dry this medium brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to do the base coat for our mouse and we're going to finish our back flowers. I'm going to be using my medium brush. The colors I'm using are brown, white, purple, magenta, and maybe a little black too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first make myself a custom color for my mouse. So I've magically done that off camera, but I'll show you how I got to it. I used brown and I used a touch of white in my brown. I'm just looking for something that's really kind of nice and neutral to use as a base coat for them, kind of like a light brown. We'll call it a tan color. So I've got that, and I'm just going to give myself a little kind of arcing type of line, or like the top side of a circle, something like that. And I'm going to bump out a couple little ears with this color. So maybe one is there, and then we've got one over in through here. And of course you can have your mouse whatever way that you want. And I want it to get a little bit darker as it goes down in through here. So I don't need a lot of paint on my brush. I'm actually just wiping it off on my paper towel. So that way I will in essence kind of run out of paint as I go down deeper into the mouse house, into the flower. So I'm just kind of lightly tapping the edges of this circle too, so it's not a really straight line. And then as I come into my into the center of my flower, it'll naturally get darker. So that way it'll look like the mouse is being shadowed as well as he's going into or coming out of the tulip. So that's looking, I think I'm going to pick up a little bit of brown and black so I stay nice and dark down here. So brown and black on my dirty brush to just give myself this nice shadowy texture down in through here. So there we go. It covered up all the purples. It got myself a nice dark color in through there. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to wash and dry this medium brush to finish up these flowers up here. And I'm looking for a loose interpretation, out of focus kind of interpretation of a similar color palette that I have down here. So I had my dark areas, which were my purple and my black. I want to be careful with the black in these out of focus areas. So I'm going to start with a little bit of purple just to kind of give myself the darkness initially, maybe a little bit in the center, but I don't need to, I want these to look out of focus. So I'm really just loosely kind of rubbing this in, again, in the direction that I feel that those petals would be. You can even kind of bring it outside of it a little bit. I'm just looking to get that color on there. When you're doing out of focus things, you're not going to see any of the detail, but the eye will detect those color patterns or similar color notes to them. So because I do have some darkness down on the bigger ones, if I bring in, I just picked up a teeny tiny bit of black, just a teeny bit of black to give again, a similar notion to the color pattern that you had down here. That will make it look more authentic. Now, because I just had that black on my brush, I don't want the black to carry into my lighter color, so I washed and dried my brush. I'm picking up a tiny bit of magenta to give myself work my way towards my highlights. And again, I'm not doing much, just kind of thinking, oh, the highlight's probably at the top, it's probably on the edges of those petals, and I want to keep it out of focus. So it's hard sometimes to do that because you really want to start putting the detail in there, but I don't want any detail on here. I want it to look out of focus. So just soft brush strokes. Now I'm picking up a teeny tiny bit of white on my dirty brush to just give maybe the little hint of an illusion of the edges of just these couple ones that are closer to us than those ones up in through there. So just carrying those color patterns will make it look a little bit more realistic. And that's all I'm going to do to those. We're going to be switching to our tiny brush for the next step. So once you've got this done, you can put this medium brush away, take out your small brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to paint the facial features on our little mouse. I'm going to be using my small brush. The colors I'm going to use are black, purple, white, magenta, and brown. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put like my eyes, nose, and mouth in place, and then with a base color, and then I'm going to add little details on top of them. So I'm going to start with a tiny bit of black paint on my brush. I'm going to put my little eyes in place. So my eyes are pretty high up on this structure, so they're a little bit in from each ear, and they're a little bit of an oval type of shape. So I'm just using black paint. I'm giving myself a solid kind of oval type of shape. I just needed to put a little bit more paint on my brush. Something like this will give me my shape. I do like when I'm doing facial features and stuff to give soft edges around a particular thing. So I just kind of loosely made a couple of little sketcherly marks around that. And then I'll do the same thing over on this side. So I've got my eye in through here, and you'll want them to be pretty similar in size to one another, but again, they don't have to be perfectly symmetrical. And then of course, just maybe a couple of little sketcherly lines on the outside of that, just to hold true to what I like to see. And then I'm going to wash and dry my brush. I'm going to put a little nose on. So my nose, I'm going to be using magenta plus white on my brush. This is going to give me a nice little pinky color, and I'm going to have mine go directly between the two eyes and then maybe down about an inch. I'm just giving myself this little tiny button kind of nose. If your pink is, you know, too pink or not pink enough, you can always add more magenta, back it off, maybe add a little bit of yellow to it if you want it to be a softer kind of pink, and then I will just kind of rub it out so it blends in a little bit with the neighboring fur, because I like my edges to be soft. Then I'm going to pick up magenta plus brown on my brush at the same time. This is going to give me a nice little dark area for the mouth. So I'm going to give myself a little line coming down from my nose like this, and then I'm going to give myself a little pouty mouth in through here. So this is magenta plus a little bit of brown. It'll show up better when we start putting the details around it, but this just gives us a little place to understand where that mouth is going. And it's a little bit, you know, as wide or maybe a little bit wider than the nose itself. But again, there can be different variations. So then I'm going to wash and dry my brush. I'm going to go back up and finish my eyes. I'm going to pick up a tiny bit of purple and white on my brush at the same time. So I have a little bit of purple and white on my brush. I'm just going to give myself a little kind of a highlight inside the eye without it going too white. This will give me almost like a little glaze of sorts in that eye. And I don't need to go all the way to the edge. I'm just kind of giving myself a little shiny part to that eye to give it some dimension and give it like a little glossy look. Now I'm picking up white paint and I'm going to give a little sparkle. So I take the sparkle and just kind of towards the top and just bring it out a little bit. So towards the top of the eye, and then just kind of pull it out just a little bit. So that just gives you a little bit of sparkle, a little bit of dimension. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up some of my tan plus white on my brush to give myself, oh, maybe a little yellow too. So tan, white, and yellow, give myself a little bit of bright little fur around those eyes. This is going to get them to pop out nice and vibrant once we put all the other pieces of puzzle into place. So this is white, tan, and yellow. And if it's too much for you, you can certainly back it off. Again, it'll look better once we put the other details around, but this is just letting those eyes kind of twinkle and sparkle and show the world that they are there, and they're gonna be very curious and inquisitive as they're coming out of the little mouse house. So then on the nose, I'm going to pick up a little bit of brown paint to give myself a couple of little nostrils. So a little brown paint, maybe a little bit more on my brush, a little brown paint for nostrils over on the edges. I don't need much. Actually, I'm going to put a tiny bit of black too. My brown doesn't seem to be showing up enough, so I picked up brown and black. Going to put a couple of little tiny nostrils, just little itty bitty ones. I don't need much. And then I'm going to add a little bit of highlight on top of that nose. I washed and dried my brush. I picked up a little bit of white paint. When I do the highlight, I don't need to do it at the tippy top of the pink, just maybe a little bit away. And I think I'm going to pick up a little bit of brown as well, just to give myself a little bit more like a tannish kind of color, or something a little bit more muted. I don't know. Just a little pink nose, something like this. That works out for me. So I have nostrils, I have a little highlight on the edge. I think that's about all I need for that. And then on the mouth part, all I need to do is put some little fur around it. So I just picked up a little bit of white paint just to get this little bit of fur, just so we can see where it's at right now. So that's just a little bit of white paint on my brush, just giving me a little bit of an outline around it. So when we go to do all the rest of the fur, we won't get confused with this little mouth in through here. So that just helps me to kind of keep my mind and my brush straight as we work our way towards the other details. And then we're going to use this same brush for the next step. So once you've got this done, fiddle with it all you want, and then you can wash and dry this small brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to finish our fur and our whiskers. I'm going to be using my small brush. The colors that I'm going to use are that tan that we created, pink, yellow, white, and black. I think that's it. So how I'm going to do this is I'm going to first create a little bit of a rusty color. These mice can come in all different kinds of colors, but I really liked the color pattern that I saw, that some of them had like a little bit of a rusty, orangey kind of color on their bridge of their nose and their ears, and then the rest is all just kind of like grayish brown, and we'll have some fun with that too, with some little black hairs too. So what I've done is I've pre-mixed myself this little bit of a rusty color. So how I got to that was I used pink and yellow, which creates like a nice peachy type of a color, kind of almost orangey in nature, and I added brown to it. So this is going to give me a really pretty like chestnutty kind of color that I can utilize. Oh, that was a little bit too much brown, so we can go back and add some more pink and yellow. So we can utilize this in that rusty area that I found very attractive. So now that I've got that color, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be putting it all around this nose area. So I've got, we'll just call it rust as a color. I'm going to put it in through here, and this, we're working in such a teeny tiny area. We can put lots of detail on here, but I'm really just concentrating on putting my brush in the direction that I feel that that fur is going. It's really short fur. As I start layering on some lighter colors, we'll be able to see more of that visual texture. But right now, just kind of putting the color pattern on, moving my brush in the direction that I feel that the fur is going to go. I want this color up in those ears too, so I just picked up a little bit more, and I'm going to put this color up in the ears. So just a little bit of a layer right on top of my original gray. So now that I've got that on there, I'm going to start just incorporating some of my tan and white to finish, or to give myself a nice textured layer. I do want the face to be separate from the chest area, so I'll add some more texture to that in a minute. But right now I'm just going to pick up, without washing my brush, I'm picking up my tan plus a tiny bit of white. So I'm gonna, this is where you're going to start to see the texture of the fur. So I'm just kind of pulling this in, just giving myself little directional brush strokes. This is the tan plus a little bit of white. I'm going to go right outside the head a little bit too, so that's going to give me that little fluffiness that you'd see along the edges. And I'm using a really small brush, so I don't need to do much, just bringing it in those directions. I feel that it would come into the forehead like this, and then I can bring it even on top of that little bit of a rusty color that we did, so that way you can see those textural changes. I'll bring a little bit of it over on the side of the head. So again, I've got my tan plus a little bit of white on my brush, and I'm curving it to give it that illusion of the shape of the head. So just little tiny bits here and there. I don't need to do a whole heck of a lot. You can cross it over in front of that ear, and if you go too much, just let it dry for a minute and you can bring back some of that base color. But you don't need to do a whole heck of a lot. We're going to be adding a little black fur on it in a second, because the mice that I saw appeared to have a layer of black fur on top of all of this lighter fur too. I think it just makes them more camouflaged out in nature, I guess. So I'm going to put little streaks up in the ears as well. So just little tiny bits to just give that little bits of dimension on those ears with a little bit of texture. I think I'm going to pick up a tiny bit of black to put the inside, little tiny darkness on the inside of those ears so we can have a little detail in through there. And then I'm going to work my way down on this right hand side. So again, just tan plus a little bit of white. Just again, give myself as much dimension or texture in this fur as I want to. So this is looking pretty good. Now I'm going to come down in through here. This is where I'm going to start picking up more white on my brush around this mouth. So I've got white on my brush to finish up this light area around the mouth. And this is going to work its way under or near this flower in through here. I'm going to get it to fade into the regular face fur in a second, but right now just kind of tapping my brush, giving myself a little bit of this lighter texture, maybe a little bit up around the nose, give it a little bit in through there, and then down this side. The face kind of stops in through here. I'm going to put a little bit of texture in the fur of the body as well. So I'm going to pick up brown right now to get this a little wet. I had a little white on my brush as well, so that's going to help to make that a nice textural element. So there's brown on my brush right now. Now I'm picking up a teeny bit of white paint to just get little bits of the fur down in through this darker region underneath the body. So it looks like it's part of the body, or it looks like it's part of the mouse, but it's going into the shadow. So this is, I started with brown and now I'm just kind of putting little bits of white on top of that wet brown. So it looks like it's kind of fading or dipping down into the chest. I'm bringing a little bit more white into this little chin area. I feel like his chin isn't big enough, so I just made it a little bit bigger and bolder with a little bit more white on my brush, and maybe a little bit, I'm picking up some of that rusty color as well, because I want to make sure that I've got all of my color pattern in and as vibrant as I want before I start adding on my whiskers or any of my darker fur, which is going to be those little black pieces I was referring to. So this is just the rust plus a little bit of white on my brush right now to make sure that I've got enough texture around this nose and enough of this color is vibrant for me before I start adding those little streaks of black. And with fur, you can keep adding these little bits of layers in order to give it that textural element to it, allowing for everything to talk to one another. I'm going to put a little bit more white on my brush, give them a little more fur coming down in front of that mouth too. So I'm just kind of closing off the mouth just a little bit. It seemed a little bit big for me. These little pieces will look like oh, that's cute. It's cute now. Sometimes you just need a couple of dots of paint to make it as cute as you want it to. Oh, that's cute. See, now I'm seeing it kind of pop out, and it's working well for me. His nose needs a little more of a highlight on it too, and maybe a little bit more magenta. I just put magenta on my brush. I just keep building. That's my deal. I want to keep building until it does everything. There we go. Now he's got a cute little nose. And now what I'm going to do is I'm washing and drying my brush. I need to add a little bit of darker texture to the fur. So a teeny bit of black plus a little bit of water on my brush. So I found that these mice have like almost an exterior layer of little fine black hairs. So I guess hairs or pieces of fur. So that's what I'm adding now, is this exterior kind of layer of these little fine black pieces of fur. You can almost think of them like little whisker, like really thin type of fur. I'm doing it right in front of those ears, right in front of the ears. And if your brush pushes a little bit hard like mine just did, I'll just come back with some of that tan. I want a little bit of shadow underneath here so I can use that darker fur to accomplish that. And same thing with over wherever it's meeting that flower. You can just pull in a little bit of the black and just let it kind of get darker as it's going around those corners, and it'll give it a little bit more dimensional element. So I've got that on there. I need to do some whiskers too, but just let me make sure I've got all these little black lines in through here. I think I'm gonna bring in just a little bit more. I like this rusty color. It's really speaking to me. So I just put a little bit more on my brush. I want to make sure I don't have black on my brush though. I'm picking up a little bit more of that rusty color. I feel like I want it coming up a little bit higher up this head. So you know, when you're going through these type of processes, if something is calling to you and saying, hey, this is making you happy, then do it more. So like this color is really making me happy, so I want more of it. Now I'm picking up a tiny bit of tan just to make sure that it blends in well, and you just, you know, make it your own. If you feel that you want to incorporate a little bit different of a color, then that's what you do. It's, you know, you get to steer the painting ship. I want a little bit more lightness around the eyes, so I'm picking up a bit of tan and white, and then I'm just going to kind of pop in, make sure those are bright enough. And now I got to do my whiskers. So my whiskers, after I put a little bit more brightness on the top of the head, my whiskers are going to be just black and white. So whisker making is one of those steps that you either love it or you, well, maybe, I guess I kind of have a love-hate relationship with whisker making, because I know how beneficial it is to animals, but you know, sometimes you don't get the flow on your brush the way that you want to. So we'll just give it a whirl here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, if I can ever finish making this cute little fur here, I'm going to wash and dry my brush. I'm going to start with black whiskers, and then I'm going to put little white highlights on them. So I'm going to use black plus water on my tiny brush. And there's lots of whiskers on these little fellas. So I'm going to just kind of have fun with it. Bring them out in different directions from the side of the face. So I've got this in through here, and I'm just going to kind of start pulling them out and pulling them out in different directions. I'm crossing them over my flowers, so that's going to make it give you that dimensional element to it. Like the little whiskers have made their way, and he's just poking his head out. You can bring them right up by that nose, and bringing them out in different angles is going to make them look more realistic. So if they all come out at exactly the same angle, they may look a little bit more manufactured than Mother Nature created. So just have fun. I just kind of keep pulling them. Again, key for me is to have a good amount of moisture on my brush, and to just go quick and not think about it too hard. When I think about my whisker making too hard, that's when I tend to make them really wide. Now I'm going to pick up a tiny bit of white paint. When I use the white, I don't necessarily need a lot of water on my brush, because the white, if you have too much water on your brush, the white will be more transparent, so you might not actually see it as much. But if you do a wide one like I just did, you should heed the warning and use moisture on your brush. So I'm just going to roll with that one, and then I'm just going to make as many as I want. I'm using the white ones in addition to the black ones so we can see them. And I was seeing this when I was looking at these little guys too. So you can do them however you'd like. And if you do one that is too much or too little for you, you can always just adjust it with your fur color. And then you just keep tweaking until you've got it the way that you want. And then we have one little step left to go, and it's going to be with the small brush. So once you've got this done, I just flip back to black paint without saying it. Once you've got this done, you can wash and dry this small brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so we are on to the final step. This is the final step of every painting, which is to sign it. So I typically sign mine in the bottom left or the bottom right corner. I'm going to be using my small brush. I'm going to go bottom left on this one with black paint. I like to sign with my initials, but you could certainly sign with your first name or the date or a symbol, or whatever you'd like for your identifying mark to be is totally fine. It's your painting. You get to sign it however you'd like to. And that's going to conclude this painting. I hope you enjoyed the process. I hope you painted yourself a very cute little critter in a flower. And I look forward to painting and sipping with you again sometime.